Caroline.
Yes.
Yes. And we're going to talk about mushroom at-home grow lab. In our abstract, we also mentioned medicinal herbs and ice tie-dyeing as fun topics, but the topic we'll focus on as a presentation with Q&A is really how to set up your at-home grow lab based on our own experiences, successes, failures, challenges. I am a nurse. I work at a university, and we'll talk about some of the resources that local universities can provide to you as well. You want to say a little bit about yourself?
I'm a machinist for the railroad. This isn't actually something that I ever thought that I'd be doing, but in no formal education. But it just kind of shows that I think anybody can do it, with a little time to do it, a little thought, plenty of research. I know we'll mention it later, but it's like, you can see almost anything moving about this. And there's 100 different ways to do the same thing. We'll get started.
Yeah, that's great. It helps to be a perfectionist and to be technically precise in some of these things, as you'll discover. Why mushrooms and why do we care? You know, the craze is big. If you look at the New England Journal of Medicine, if you look at Paul Stamets' work, he's a great mycologist out of the West Coast. There are so many studies coming out, and people are just realizing what I think history has known for a long time, that mushrooms are healthy, beneficial. Depending on what you're trying to address, they can be extremely useful to the body. Just like herbs can be, just like spices can be. So I share just a couple things here that you can look up. Do your own research, figure out what the right mushrooms are for you and why. We will not dive in heavily to psychedelic mushrooms, but we are pretty well versed in those as well. We'll focus mostly on the culinary benefits, the nutrient-rich immune system support kind of benefits. But you know, if you've been watching even mainstream media, that the benefits of psychedelic mushrooms, of psilocybin specifically, for anxiety, for depression, for treatment-resistant depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, whether it's a hero's dose or a microdosing strategy, there's benefits involved in all of that. In the day-to-day lion's mane, growing lion's mane, cordyceps, oysters, some of those, we'll talk about the benefits of those in your everyday cooking if you actually cook. Why a mushroom grow lab? Do you want to say anything about this one? Sure. Yeah, we talked about whether or not we need 2 mics here.
I pretty much started doing an at-home grow lab. It was hard to source them to begin with. You usually have to go to farmers markets. You have to know somebody that does it almost. And I didn't really know. I knew it was going to be challenging, but I didn't know, the correct directions to go with it. So I just started researching it a little bit, and it did help that I did have a couple of guys that worked there who wanted to try it along with me, so we were able to do it as a group, in a sense.
Yeah, I think we also really are into being self-sovereign, even though we live in a city and a house that gets sourced with electricity and all of that. At some point, we might not want to be in that situation, and the more we can do for ourselves, the better, as we all talk about in this community. Well, you need a lot to get started. Here's a short list, and we will be going through from start to finish the process in the demo for you.
You can see here that this is some grain spawn that I had inoculated, and in the process of doing this, mold and mycelium are always fighting for the same property. They aren't naturally going to grow in the same environment, and that's why being sterile is so important, is that you want to promote good mycelium growth and not have any kind of mold or bacteria.
This is the biggest point of failure, and it's something we talk a little bit about because we're pretty small scale. We can see the mold, we'll hold up flashlights, you can find it. In the large scale production, we're pretty sure some mold gets through.
Yeah, if you ever eat a mushroom and get a stomach ache, you're pretty sure that you probably have sourced some mushrooms that had some mold in it at some point. I do know that they talk about mycelium being able to introduce some of the DNA from the in the same process. I don't know if that's really true or not, but contamination is bad.
Yep, so when you see it, you don't like it, you want to get rid of it. So you need to start out with some sort of mycelium. We'll show you 3 examples of ways to source your mycelium, which is the part of the mushroom that grows under the ground that's constantly fighting to survive. So it is probably the one that has more of the immune strengthening properties. This is why Paul Stamets, when he uses psilocybin and lion's mane, he uses the mycelium from the lion's mane, not the fruit. The mycelium are the spores.
No, that's spores.
I'm sorry,
Mycelium
not
is the-
spores.
yeah. But most of that stuff I've sourced off Amazon. There's plenty of places that you can go and buy mycelium or in a syringe for inoculation to grain spawn. But it's just as easy at the same cost as getting it on Amazon.
Okay, so you can also
So this is
mycelium and honey.
This is honey, which would be considered liquid culture, and it's the easiest way to multiply the mycelium that you have. And also, if you are purchasing spores, the easiest way to get the spores to go to mycelium than trying to get the spores to be put on grain and hoping that they'll find mates in order to replicate. I just take, I've got a recipe I got off online. It's a very small amount of honey and water, and you sterilize it for about 15 minutes, and then you can inoculate it. You can even take a piece of mushroom, like the stem, and put it in there, and it will start to grow its own mycelium.
About how many days of growth is that?
I'd say probably 2 weeks. The one on the left would only be within a week, a couple of days, and then you see the one on the far right that's on the agitator is actually spores that I took from a syringe and then injected into the honey. And then the one in the middle would be oyster that was just strict mycelium.
Go ahead.
Do spores go bad?
I haven't had any go bad. I could see that possibly. I have had bad samples though that people have sold me that had mold already in it. A lot of times when they take, I'll show a picture of taking a spore print, but if they are very clean when they take their spore prints and harvest the spores, you will have contamination with that. And this is with the honey is another good way of trying to weed out some of the contamination, because you'll see the mold growth on the surface of the honey. And that's also where agar comes into play, like this one here. That is an excellent way of being able to separate your. So what this is these are actually a piece of oyster mushrooms that we got from the university that's native to Minnesota, and then I cut them up and then put them on. They didn't travel very well; they got really full of moisture. But you can put them on the agar, and then the mycelium starts to grow within 2 days on the agar. And then if you do happen to have any kind of mold on contamination in that, you can go in there and harvest off the good mycelium off the agar and then transfer it to another plate, or put it into the honey.
You can buy agar. Eric makes it and pours it himself. We get the petri dishes, sterile.
Yeah, you can buy them on Amazon, or you can get them from any of the university reuse centers. They'll have a lot of already pre-sterilized agar plates.
Some of the folks in the psychedelic community will put dye in the agar. They think it grows, it's prettier as
It looks
grows.
nice, yeah. That middle one is cordyceps, so that would be what would grow on insects.
We'll talk about those in a little bit. We've been told to avoid the dyes. It just might not be as great, right? For obvious reasons, even though we use them down here at cost. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that you can buy an agar that is mold resistant, but we've been told that's not optimal either, just to do a regular agar.
Yeah, if
Do you
you're,
know
if,
why?
I don't. It doesn't promote as much growth.
Okay, so you need a substrate. So you go from, you have your mycelium, now where does it need to go?
So once you have the mycelium, you would inoculate grain to multiply it. This is not sterilized yet, but I use rye berry just because I get it so readily at home. But you can use corn, mulberry, any kind of grain. I soak it for a day. I screen it, boil it, and then dry it, and then go to a sterilizer or Instapot or canning machine, or what is it called? All-American canner.
Yeah, we'll show a few of those. In this picture, you also see what's like a meat grinder. That's what Eric uses to mix up the wood.
Yep. So, and then after you have your grain spawn has colonized the bag that you would have that in, or jars. I've used ball jars in the past too. Then you would transfer it to a substrate, and that's where the fruiting body can come from. And
We'll get there. Okay. So.
But I run everything through the sterilizer before it's introduced to any kind of mycelium.
There's some sterilizing options we've used. We've upgraded to
So
a bigger toy.
I started with the Instapots, and you can't get 15 psi in an Instapot, you can get 13, so you just have to sterilize a little bit longer. Obviously, you can't fit as much in it, but you can do quart jars just very well, and then run them for about 2 hours.
And then your toy that can go
Yeah.
out the house.
So then I bought an All-American actually sterilizer instead of canner, so there isn't as much safety valves related to it. But I can put it at whatever pressure I want. So I run that at 15 psi in 90 minutes to 2 hours. And then I will usually let it cool and then do the process again on the larger blocks. I started moving to 5-pound blocks, which that's pretty close to a 5-pound block. And I just want to make sure that it's heated thoroughly.
So we did also learn from one of the mycologists at the university that we should be sterilizing twice. That can be one of your fail points in terms of mold. Anything you want to say more about that? No, just do it. Okay, so I've included a few of these wordy slides just so you can have the slide deck. I did tweet out the QR code to the PDF of the notes. So you'll find some of the details here, and I'll just echo that most of this you can find online. What you won't find online are some of Eric's notes that we've included here with some of his recipes. So on the earlier slide, you had the recipe for his hardwood, for example.
Yeah, these are just sterilization times for what I found with the All-American 15 psi.
So we sterilize everything, really.
Yep.
Substrate, agar,
Everything gets
the grain, a lot of sterilization steps through the process. So then you need to inoculate your sterilized product.
So we source these through the University Reuse Center. It kind of sounds like it's becoming more and more popular online for people to be doing it this way.
What are
these are, the one on the right is actually a still air box, and then the one on the left is a flow hood. Both do, in a sense, the same thing. What they're doing is they're filtering the air, and they're not allowing the air to come over the work product. You can do the same, which I started with in front of my convection oven on a cookie sheet. You just make sure that everything's been sprayed down with alcohol, and cleaned, and then you allow it to dry before you start your sterilization or your process.
So talk about your success rates though between the two techniques.
So when I was doing it in the oven, and you try to turn down all the airflow and move it within your kitchen, I was getting about a 50% success rate. So about 50% of everything I did ended up with mold on it. But then since I moved to the flow hoods, and you can get a lot more basic flow hoods that are just a filter that sits in front of you on a desk, and a lot easier to deal with. But almost 100% success rate with flow hoods. I will once in a while get into something like these agar plates here. I didn't have a sterile tweezers. I was trying to sterilize it, but you really almost need, instead of just straight alcohol, flame sterilize in between each sample taking. And what I was doing was I would flame sterilize it, and then take 6 samples, and it didn't work. So you can see that maybe one of them is clean, and 5 of them will have mold.
So it's really a lesson in patience, in technique, in being diligent to the process. We've learned best practices by mistakes a lot of the time.
And just, you have to know that some stuff's not going to work.
And I would say these pictures are really just to show you that almost every step of the process ends up in the hood.
Yes.
And then, here's our write-up of inoculation. Once once you've inoculated your product, it needs to colonize, and this is what our kitchen might look like.
So this is how I started, right? With the Instapots, and then as I was sterilizing and colonizing, I had to have a nice semi-dry, warm place to store them, so I just did it in the kitchen. And,
Wait a minute, did I get low time preference wrong? Like, when we're more patient, we have low time preference or high time preference?
High time.
Okay, so I got it right. We're more patient. Yeah, okay, I got that. I forgot to Google that just to be sure. Okay. And then we've, well, here's more examples.
So since I moved away from doing the ball jars as much, and I started doing the patch bags, which I source off of Amazon as well. You can get them in different sizes, and I'll just do a full, 5 pounds of grain all at once, sterilize that, inoculate it, and then I'll move to the 5 pounds. That's wood chips there, and it's just extruded wood chips that you would have for a wood stove. They don't use any kind of adhesives or anything. It's all made under pressure. So it's a really easy way to get any hardware store, get hardwood sawdust, hardwood sawdust.
Do you want to talk about why we use the larger bags, and if you have a smaller amount of bag, you don't end up with as much fruit?
So it all comes kind of down to biomass. The more amount of biomass you make available, the more of the fruity body you're going to get out of it. The other thing I just saw in another picture I forgot to mention is that instead of doing the jars, you can do Uncle Ben's rice as well. But I found in the past that the rice has got high moisture content to it, and it will promote, even though it's in a sterile bag, it does want to promote mold growth faster than mycelium. But there's a amount of success with that. And then now this is where I've moved into the basement. We started a farmer's market, so I try to keep a certain I try to keep a certain amount of fruiting body available every week. So every week I started a process.
Okay, this goes on incubation, colonization, and then once that bag is fully white and ready to fruit, you need a space to fruit.
That bag probably has another 2 to 3 weeks to go. You can tell where the mycelium is getting pretty well established, but it definitely needs to get a lot whiter. So then the fruiting chamber I'm using at the moment, I've actually bought a 10 by 10 one now, but it's just a regular in-house grow tent. And then I took a tote with a 4-inch duct fan, and then it's a ultrasonic vaporizer for like a reptile aquarium, and then I run that off of a humidifier. It's a sensor for humidity, so it just turns on when it drops below 90%, turns off when it gets around 93% humidity.
So tell them why you built the humidifier instead of using them over the counter.
So I was using an over-the-counter humidifier, and unless you're being able to duct it into it, it doesn't last very long being in that high humidity. If I were to actually place the humidifier inside the grow tent, it only lasts about 3 to 4 months. And then during the fruiting process, they do need to have some sort of light. That's just a full spectrum, low temperature. You can use an LED, but that one's fluorescent. It's just for something for the mushrooms to grow towards once they start coming out of the substrate.
The light's also on a timer, and these are mostly lion's mane.
The timer I set for 12 hours, so it's 12 hours.
And then there's different approaches to how you cut and open the bag and how it promotes then the fruiting once the mycelium are exposed to more oxygen and less CO2.
Lion's mane likes to fruit before it's fully colonized, and a lot of times it wants to fruit towards that air patch, because that's where it's getting its oxygen. When there's a higher CO2 content, it tends to want to think that it's underground more and still keep going. So a lot of times lion's mane I end up cutting the tops off before I get a good solid like fruiting body. The oysters,
Which are on the left.
those are black pearl oysters. They tend to kind of do the same thing. But that's what that bag is, black pearl. No, that one's actually just the native white oyster. But anyhow, they like to colonize the wood completely before they start to fruit. And then what I've started doing with those now is I'll actually, instead of cutting the top off, I'll just nip a corner of the bag, and then I'm able to add water that way with an atomized spray bottle. And,
spraying it.
with the 5-pound blocks, you can get multiple fruiting bodies out of it, but the first one's always going to be the densest and the best.
So how often are you spraying it? Or like, I guess you guys look at it.
I spray it every day. With that 90-ish% humidity, you probably don't have to. But if I start seeing the substrate starting to dry out a little bit, I'll make sure I keep plenty of water on it.
The mycologist said to you, and he'll send bags home with his students. They grow them over the course of a semester, or they do the process, and he'll just have them leave them on the kitchen counter, and the bags open and spray them a couple times a day. It just room humidity to fruit.
Why I started doing just flipping the corner is it kind of keeps the bag as its own greenhouse, and it also limits how much exposure to open air and moving air, because then you get more contamination that way.
Yeah, that's like the contamination you guys get. That's mine.
What's that?
The contamination of like, when like my substrate grew lots of it.
Yeah, yeah. You got to keep the air flow down, and then also that trying to get the sterilization, trying to get it deep into it. And then clean water. Like if you're using city water, there's so much in it that's really bad. I got well water, and I still have a real high content of mildew in it, but I've been running it through charcoal filters, and it seems to work the best.
Okay.
But you're talking about contaminants before you've opened it to fruit.
I get like used substrate.
Oh, you do get used substrate.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, are you using that as another substrate, or are you using that as like a fertilizer?
As like just regrowing.
Oh, I
Substrate
see.
that was used once already.
Yep.
And they're free.
They've chilled it back into.
Yeah, you can. So some of the fruity bodies, you can put them in the refrigerator for a while, and then when you bring them back out, it's like another season change. And then, but the other thing too is to try and keep a lot of fruity body off of the substrate when you harvest it.
Okay.
Well, and use gloves too. But if you leave any of the fruity body behind when it dries out, it starts to mold.
Okay.
So they might be giving you a product that's set up to mold.
Yeah, that's what,
Yeah.
And just keep in mind, the mycelium's really happy underground doing its thing, surviving. The reason that the fungi fruit is because they're threatened or believe they're going to die in that location. They need the fruit to spore to stay alive. Yeah, so it's really, that's a reproduction strategy. And then if you apply the principles of what's happening in nature to your grow situation, you can start to learn what environment you need to foster for it to fruit, for it to think it's dying, right? The mycelium need to think they're dying to fruit, or they'll be happier.
Another crazy thing to do as well is just bring it outside. It seems like being outside, being in natural rainwater and that kind of stuff tends to drive the contamination away, and it will make it fruit again. A lot of times I'll just bring it out and I'll throw it in the garden, or I'll put it into a pile of wood chips, or you can rebury it as well. And that's actually leads into the next picture, the one on the left here. That was what happened. It had contamination. I brought it outside and really cleaned itself out pretty well. Then the other ones are just ones that we harvested.
A bunch of oysters, which are just great edibles. Here's a few examples of enjoying them in the now, and then we'll say a few words about.
Yeah, and then the ones on the right in the pan are chestnuts, and they're pretty good. They get really crunchy, almost like fresh fried oysters. And then everything on the right is actually brown rice with mycelium, lion's mane. That it's kind of, we're not going all the way to the fruity body with it, and then you dehydrate it and grind it, mill it, and you can use it as an additive. Yeah, like what she's got.
So what I have in these little packets, this is lion's mane mycelium grown on organic brown rice. That once that bag was fully white, we chunked it up, dehydrated it, milled it in a commercial mill that we bought just off Amazon. And I used Paul Stamets Host Defense product that has these same two ingredients as an example for me to get the powder texture right, powder color match. I've not run a mass spec on my product to know exactly how much active ingredient there, the composition. But we use it, we sell it at the farmer's market. A teaspoon in your smoothie or your oatmeal or whatever you eat, it's basically a lion's mane mycelium supplement. And as I said, I'm a firm believer in the strength of the mycelium, even more than in the nutrition of the fruit, but we like both. You'll see some competitor products in co-ops or local grocery stores, and if you read the ingredients, they'll say lion's mane mycelium, organic fermented brown rice, and lion's mane fruiting body, which in my mind, they're just adding more mass to their product. I'm not sure they're adding more power to the product, but we need a study to prove out some of that. So I have a few of these for sale if you want to try them, but really it's just been our way of experimenting with the product and what to do with some of the products once we have them. We've been selling at a farmer's market, kind of fun, some of our tie-dye and our mushrooms, and some of them are just super popular, of course, and it's a lot of education because people just don't know. So we'll bring out a bag and show people what we're fruiting out of, and people love it, of course, seeing it.
It's really surprising how many people know what lion's mane is, but they don't know about anything else, like oysters and chestnuts. And once they try it, it just seems like we have more and more people coming back. We've had a lot of restaurants lately. I can't make enough mushrooms to supply our local demand.
So now we want to share, should we pause just for any immediate questions top of mind on the process so far? We've given you like hours and years of education in 10 minutes.
I've never had lion's mane mushrooms. What do they taste like?
Yeah, it's a dense mushroom. It's almost like people use it as a protein substitute. It's a dense, meaty mushroom. How would others describe it in terms of taste? Earthy or not earthy?
These are really great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like shiitake best for like a pasta substitute, but I'm sure that you could do the same with this lion's mane. We have a bistro that grills it and uses it as a main dish. And
As a veggie alternative?
yeah,
Alternative?
I have not tried grilling it yet.
I'd be interested, have you had anyone ask you for the bags so they can grow it themselves?
We've talked about it. You could have that one if you want to try it.
Yeah,
I bought one of these before.
Did you?
This company, Smallhold.
Yeah.
You know those guys?
I have not.
Yeah, they sell those things in New York. And,
We have a local group that sells them as well online. But
yeah, it's cool.
And then you see Shroomly, right? Shroomly is the little box that gets advertised online, and you can kind of grow your product in there. I think it's more sustainable and cost effective to figure out how to do a little bit of it on your own at home.
But
Yeah, I just bought two lion's mane packages over there. I'm just gonna put one in my coffee right now. How much should I put from that bag?
Yeah, it'd be a teaspoon, and this is a great example of just knowing some of the differences. I put about 10 servings in the sample bag, so I'd say about a teaspoon. There's about 10 teaspoons in there.
Yeah.
And it will dissolve, but it's going to be, if you don't drink it super quickly in a coffee, it is not air freeze dried instant coffee like. There are mushroom products out there that are like that. Mud water is made with chai and tea, and then Rise, RYZE, has a coffee. It's an instant coffee with 7 mushrooms or so, 7 or so mushrooms, and I've used that product. That is like dissolved like hot cocoa or instant coffee. This powder will dissolve, but then it's going to settle to the bottom because it's not made to be an instant dissolving product. It'll work, a teaspoon or so, but drink it kind of fast. In a smoothie, it just gets stuck in the thicker liquid, which is why it's better for that. It's more like a protein powder. Think of it like a protein powder.
Got it. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, you bet. Enjoy.
So you mentioned before that you have a goldfish and you can take the bag outside and it's not cars in sunlight. So why don't we just start there instead of starting?
you can, and I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm always doing too much, but you can actually make, especially for oysters, mushroom beds in your backyard. So you dig it out, and you layer, and I don't remember, but you can use hay or straw, and then you can pasteurize that instead of sterilize it with water. And it's a little bit longer of a process, but it does work well. I've also seen where people just take the inoculated grain and put it directly into straw in buckets with holes in the buckets, and then you just hang it, and if you have enough rainwater, you can always call it water as well. But eventually it'll colonize that straw and then start to fruit outside the bucket. Kind of like hanging tomatoes and stuff like that.
So from beginning the process to actually harvesting, how long does it take?
Depends on the mushroom.
Yep, there are some that are more aggressive than others. I would say a month and a half to 2 months, because there's so many steps in between, especially if you're starting with spores or a small amount of mycelium to begin with, you have to get a larger amount of grain spawn to inoculate your substrate. And then the more grain spawn you use compared to substrate, the faster it's going to inoculate or colonize your substrate. So if you're trying to be, say stingy and you want to use 5 pounds for 4 different blocks of substrate, that's going to take longer to grow through all of that than it is if I were to take that 5 pounds and add right to the 5 pounds of wood, and it'll go a lot faster that way. I mean, you could probably have down to a couple of weeks and be getting mushrooms out of a larger amount of colonized grain.
So I was looking at this bag because typically he'll write the strain, the date that we started that bag, what's all in there. And I know for sure we were in the end of July and we were fruiting bags that had been started back in May, for example, April and May. And that's from the wood to fruiting, so that's not even all the steps before.
And some of that has to do also with the temperature. I'm putting it in my basement, which I'm probably mid to high 60s, and I should have in the mid 70s.
So, okay, I think go ahead.
My question. Please stop just moving disclosures, but do you guys sell this psilocybin mushroom as well?
So before he answers that, this is being recorded.
Oh, okay.
And
fine, actually.
yeah, let's do a Q&A after.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Sounds good.
What I wanted to say, did we have a bag going around did we have one that was more fully white or not?
That one was, but it didn't travel.
Okay. What Eric just described in the process, and maybe we'll cover it again later, we'll finish this a few more slides, where we showed you the picture of the rye or the rice that's fully consumed in white, whether it's in a bag or a jar. That bag then gets broken up and spread into multiple bags of wood. So it isn't just like a 1-to-1 ratio. You only need a spoonful of that mycelium infused, whatever it's eaten, into the wood, and then it just takes time. And that's where he's saying if you put more of it into the wood, it's going to take over the wood faster and eat it. But those bags end up producing multiple bags of that fruit. So what you see in this picture is the wood that's been taken over by the mycelium in round 2, if you will. But it started with a handful from the first bag of rice or rye. Is that making sense to people? Like there's a 2-step sort of thing with this particular mushroom type. So then again, we're certainly back to strategies to repeat or to clone, and there are guidelines on how many generations you should clone before you start with new spores. Generally, the guys we've talked to, some of them will say go 5-6 generations, not more. But do you want to speak a little bit to the strategy of cloning?
So really, with the agar, it's pretty simple. You can just take a piece of the mushroom, and you try to take a piece that's probably not been exposed to air too much, so you cut it open, and you just put it on the agar plate and seal it up. And within a couple of days, you'll get what you see there, which is more mycelium growing off the piece of mushroom. So in a sense, you can go to the farmer's market, buy the mushroom you want for dinner. You can cut a piece of that off and put it on an agar plate, and now you have a sample that you can inoculate from and also reproduce more from. And you didn't pay anything other than what you were going to eat for dinner. So.
Yeah. And when we move from agar into the next step.
Yep, so you can move from this agar plate directly to the grain, or you can move from the agar to the honey, which the honey you're going to have multiple, syringes worth. But when you take that agar and move directly to the grain, it grows really well and really fast. It's clean.
Yeah.
Because the agar is showing you that it has liquid generation.
I I think our favorite approach is doing that. So if you've got an agar plate like that, you might cut it into 4 sections into 4 different bags. It's gonna take some time, but you know that it's a clean sample, and we just have to make sure our tweezers are clean.
And so,
And skillful.
I was wondering if you any thoughts on like the little tinctures that you can buy at farmers markets that have like lines in them. I bought one, but I have no idea if it's any good or what.
Yeah, so I make tinctures. I haven't done it out of mushrooms yet, and then so tinctures are basically a plant infused vodka or high 80 proof or stronger alcohol, drinking alcohol. Brandy, vodka are the 2 common ones. People make a tincture. I don't know with respect to the benefits of that. When I'll use plant material and I'll make a tincture for, let's say, St. John's wort plants or something like that. Alternatively, I'll use olive oil plant material. The ratios are just slightly different, and those are the products I brought to show. Plant material that's been put into olive oil, so it's infused olive oil that's been strained, and then beeswax has been added to make it a salve instead of a raw oil, just an oil. Tincture is the same thing, 6 weeks typically infused. I don't know if the medicinal benefits are there. I know some people that use them speak really highly of them. Spore prints?
yeah, so this is an example of taking a spore print. It's just one more way of being able to replicate the mushroom that you had. Pretty much just take a piece of tin foil, take the cap off the mushroom, you put it on the tin foil, and then you cover it overnight. If you feel that it's really dry, you can put 1 drop of water on top of the mushroom cap, but you don't want it to be wet. And by the morning, you have the next spore print. And then you can take that and either scrape it with a scalpel, and you can put it on agar, or you can add it to distilled water in a syringe, and then that would be what you can use down the line to inoculate. Or you could save the spore print itself in a bag. You try to keep it as sterile as possible. I mean, the best thing to do would be do it under flow, but you can do it in an area that doesn't have much airflow.
And I mean, that can last for a long time. Those are the spores we're buying in liquid.
Pretty much lasts forever. Yeah. I haven't really had too many spores go bad.
All right, so we've given you an example in the next 2 slides of the different parameters that are specific to your mushroom. So once you know what you want to grow, do your research to know exactly what that mushroom likes. What is the mycelium like in terms of temp, humidity, light, air, and moisture, pH level, CO2 level, and then what is it like for fruiting conditions. So we're just giving you an example of know what that particular strain likes, and multiple strains might not grow well together for the reason that all of these are.
Well, most of them are pretty similar. You can almost grow all of them together. Kind of the cool thing between these 2 pictures is you can see where how dense this is. This is a first fruit for that.
Lion's mane.
That's lion's mane. That would be a first flush. And then you can see this next picture where how it's more open and airy, not as dense. That would be a second flush.
So maybe you could argue the quality is maybe different.
Most people don't go past the first flush, and that's probably why that gentleman was getting bags that he could reflush again. The other thing you could do to get it to reflush sometimes is you just submerge the whole block of wood and then put it back in the freezing chamber just to get it moist.
All right, 4 more slides, and then we'll just open up for conversation and call it good. What do you want to say about the Last Among Us or something?
I have
HBO zombie series, cordyceps take over the human body. That's this.
I haven't really tried these yet. They're supposed to be like an energy drink in the morning. I've been growing them. I have not dehydrated them yet. But you can, I got 2 different examples here where I'm growing them in the bags now, trying to use a larger biomass. And all that is just brown rice again and yeast, because these have to grow inside, they want to grow inside an insect, so I had to give it some sort of more protein than just straight grain. And you don't have to transfer these to any kind of substrate. This is just one step. You sterilize your yeast in your rice and inoculate it with cordyceps and set them in like 55 to 60 degrees, and they just grow. done it both in the jars and
What's the difference between the ones growing on the green and the ones from the insects? I've heard there are some differences.
I really don't know. This is Cordyceps militaris, and it's the one that they tend to use most for energy supplement. I know there's probably like 100 or 200 different types of cordyceps, and then the way they tend to transfer from insect to insect.
It could be logical to think that the yeast-rice combo is different, obviously, than the bug that the fungi is trying to eat. So in that way, would that fungi be nutritionally different? And again, a mass spec would help confirm that. They're very expensive. You can see them. You can see them dehydrated and sold, especially in Asian grocery stores. They're not cheap. They're one of the more, think of like saffron spice, super spendy for the weight. But
and I was going to add too, I bought those off of Amazon just the same as any of the other mycelium.
Yeah, any for sale.
Cordyceps, I don't.
Not yet. In fact, the mycologist at the university was quite impressed that Eric had successfully fruited these. It's not easy to do outside of nature. Yeah.
I'd like to get a freeze dryer instead of an air dry, so it'll hold the body of the mushroom well. When you air dry, it tends to shrink it a little bit more.
Accepting donations, those cost $3,000. Okay, so do your research for sure. We've learned a lot from a lot of different sources.
That middle chart is pretty nice to have. That shows you how to mix your agar with
we've joined our local mycology community. There's a lot of folks that forage. We don't forage, although it seems really fun. It might be fun to get into that. We really got into just doing this at home. Guiding principles, failures to be expected. We have so many examples of mold everywhere. Is there any other example of major failures besides mold that you can think of?
But you can see on that honey where you have that raft of mold on the top of it, that exposes pretty quickly if it's going to be successful.
Yeah. Yep. And again, remember that the honey formula is diluted, so you're not throwing away like a cup and a half of honey. You're throwing away maybe
it's a pretty
a
small.
couple of tablespoons.
I do most of it by weight, so it's a certain weight of honey to a certain weight.
Guiding principle to end with, don't stop learning. The picture on the right is something we can talk about after. They do grow a little differently. Yep. Questions, comments, discussion. Thank you guys for listening to a non-programming presentation. So the slide deck is in the QR code that I tweeted out to the TABconf, or that I messaged out to the TABconf group, if you can find it. Otherwise, I can pull it up as well, just so you have the slides. Otherwise, email us for them if you want, and we'll get them to you that way. I just want to make sure I got the email. The email does not have an extra U, so it's just shroom22@gmail. I'm just going to correct that. Because I saw you mention you took pictures, maybe we'll be able to reach us.
It's definitely fun. It's a good challenging hobby, and something you can do as much of or as little of as you want. You don't even have to pay attention to it all the time. I like to check on, how it's done overnight, but you want to go for days.
I heard that mushrooms grow really well in ground combing. Is that true? Have you guys tried that?
I have tried it, and it is true, but I think when I did it last, I had too much coffee to substrate, and it took a while for it to really want to move into a fruiting body. But I did originally, I just needed to mix less coffee. I think it doesn't grow solely in coffee on its own, but it is a good additive to, for some sort of nutrient supplement to the substrate. you sterilize that just like you would anything else. Because if you let it sit moist too long, it molds pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think the challenge if you're going to do it on any sort of scale is figuring out how much at each step should be moving forward. So there's always something to do at each step, and especially like in the case we were trying to make product available to the farmer's market, being able to work backward and know that each week we'd have something predictably opening to fruit. Go for it.
Yeah, what all do you sell at the farmer's market, like on a weekly basis? Like how many types do you have?
To be honest with you, everything I can bring, I can sell. I don't have enough to supply to the demand. Once people start learning that it's available, and then we've got a lot of restaurants and bistros, bars locally which would actually be a better plan to be able to just call them when a flush is ready. You know, say I've got 6 blocks that are flushing, and then I can either just bring them the block and they can pick it as they need it, which is going to last a lot longer, or I can pick the flush and then it lasts about a week.
A couple pounds worth, so we're selling fresh mushrooms that we weigh by the quarter pound. And depending on how busy the farmer's market is, a few pounds, like we're not making money, necessarily huge amounts of money from this hobby at all. It's more just, I think, the exposure and the education. Most farmers markets we've talked to can handle 1 mushroom vendor, not even 2, just because none of people are into it yet. Which is why Eric's saying some of these other clients, if you will, restaurants or the like, are great as alternatives where you can message them and say, we've got a flush this week, do you want it?
So once the fruiting is complete, you start harvesting. If you don't cut them all, how long can it stay there and you just harvest it?
Usually about a week. It'll take, and then if you are just harvesting partial fruit from it, I would recommend either, having some rubber gloves on and then you alcohol your hands, and then whatever tool you might, I usually just grab them to a spot and take out, but you can use a tool too, but you'd like to try and keep the tools, alcohol the tool, let it dry, and then use that. Because in that process, you are introducing outside contamination to it. Even though it's in open air, usually you don't have it out in open air, it's in that fruiting chamber. And, but from when it starts to pin, it's probably not a full week to when it's edible, like where you would want to eat it. And then you probably have another week after that until it's ready to spore out, depending on the conditions. Sometimes it could be just a couple of days too. Mostly, you want to try and eat them before they spore. They're not as nice when they're all peeled out.
So we'll take some of the bigger ones and we'll cut them off and sell or eat. Those little ones are still going to get quite big, so you don't want to take them all in the same flush, but like you said, you're not going to go many days. You're going to start being icky or slimy or moldy or whatever. Yeah.
Do you guys see a lot of crossover in the homesteading types, those types of people? Do you think they'll actually do this thing and do it as part of their garden?
I think so, yes. I think especially if you can introduce more on the outside, where, contamination is always an issue, but it's a lot easier to not have to deal with as much being sterile when you're outside.
A lot of our farmer friends forage, that's probably the more common, or they're plugging wood to do shiitake. Those are the 2 kind of common.
That could take years when you're plugging wood up.
I do think there's a lot of crossover in the communities for sure. And then in the foraging community and the mycology community, there's certainly a lot of crossover with just the psilocybin-containing mushrooms. An interesting fact, lion's mane mycelium has psilocin in it. It's one of the only edible mushrooms that has psilocin, like I said, in the mycelium. By the time it fruits, there's no psilocin or psilocybin in the fruit. But in the mycelium there is, which makes me wonder again, if we're putting it in our smoothies, is there some of that cognitive benefit, the neurogenesis, the neuroplasticity injustice to be that, you know, we're just accidentally experiencing. Okay, I don't know that any camera's gonna get that, but I'll leave it on the screen if you wanna come and capture it. Again, it's just the slides, and our Instagram is over on our little chalkboard sign over there too. Yeah.
Have you ever read Bitcoin is the Mycelium of Money? Are you familiar with that?
Oh yeah, and
Okay.
Brandon Quidum is one of our local Bitcoiners. He runs
okay.
our meetup in the Twin Cities area. It's a great piece.
Yeah, I've followed it closely, and it's fascinating. I'm glad that you guys came exposed to it.
Oh, thank you. He also didn't he do a paper on the turning? He wrote another piece that talks about the 4 turnings or the 4th turning.
Yeah, I haven't
It's a decent
read it yet, but
read,
yeah,
yeah.
it sounds interesting.
Yep, that's another great
Yeah,
read.
anytime you guys make to Minneapolis with it, we do a meetup at Brandon hosts at O'Shaughnessy's, and it's a really cool place.
Okay.
Thank you.